A white officer displays disrespect by spitting on a black man. The man, after being insulted, remains calm and does not react immediately. As the situation unfolds, it is revealed that he is the newly appointed police chief. And this revelation quickly changes everything in the precinct. The story highlights the abuse of power, injustice within the police system, and the fight for justice and respect from a new leader. Late one Tuesday morning in August, Chief Marcus Williams, a newly appointed police chief, arrived at the Blue Ridge Police Department in North Carolina. Dressed casually in a plaid shirt, jeans, and sneakers, Marcus didn't look the part of a seasoned law enforcement officer who had spent years rising through the ranks. But that was precisely his intent, to blend in and observe his officers without the influence of his rank. As a black man stepping into this role, Marcus was aware of the tension and misconduct that had plagued the precinct. And he wanted to see the department for what it truly was. As he walked toward the precinct's entrance, he noticed the office's casual chatter and laughter. None of them recognized him, which was no surprise given his recent appointment. He had deliberately kept his arrival low profile, saving the official introduction for later that morning. However, as he stepped closer to the building, a white officer named Officer Paul Daniels, with a smug grin, walked up to him. "Lost, are we?" Daniels asked, his tone condescending, as a few officers watched, amused. When Marcus calmly questioned him, Daniels became even more aggressive, telling him to leave. The situation escalated quickly when Daniels, without warning, spat in Marcus's face. Although taken aback, Marcus maintained his composure, and instead of reacting aggressively, he calmly wiped his face and walked away. Little did Daniels know, Marcus was about to reveal his true identity. Later in the briefing room, the office's smug expressions turned to shock when Marcus introduced himself as the new chief of police, forcing them to confront their actions and the toxic culture within the department. As Marcus Williams stepped up to the podium in front of the precinct's officers, the atmosphere in the room shifted from casual chatter to a stunned silence. His calm demeanor only heightened the tension, especially when he revealed his true identity as the newly appointed police chief. The officers, who had been laughing and joking moments before, now stood in shocked disbelief, especially Officer Paul Daniels, whose smirk quickly faded as recognition set in. The realization that the man they had just disrespected was now their boss was a blow to their egos. Marcus's voice rang out in the room, steady and authoritative. "I wanted to see this department for what it truly is. I wanted to observe how things run when no one is watching. And what I've witnessed today is not just disappointing. It's unacceptable." The silence in the room deepened as Marcus continued, making it clear that he would not tolerate any form of disrespect. Not just for himself but for anyone in the department. He had not come to make friends, but to hold everyone accountable. Turning his attention directly to Officer Daniels, Marcus's words cut through the room. "When you spat in my face, it wasn't just an insult to me, it was an insult to the badge you wear, to the oath we've all taken, and to the community we are supposed to protect." Daniels, who had once been the center of attention with his arrogance, now stood like a deer caught in headlights. Realizing the magnitude of his actions, Marcus didn't back down. He made it clear that this wasn't about punishment, it was about setting a standard. "Respect is not optional," he asserted. "It's the foundation of our work. Without it, we fail not just each other, but the very community we are sworn to serve." His words were firm and unyielding, signaling a new era in the department, one where accountability and respect would no longer be compromised. The rest of the officers, now visibly uncomfortable, understood that Marcus was not just another figurehead, he was someone who meant business. And the culture of complacency they had once gotten away with would no longer be tolerated. Marcus had drawn a line in the sand, and those who couldn't meet his expectations would have to leave. In the days following the intense meeting, the atmosphere at the precinct shifted dramatically. Officer Daniels, who had once been a source of tension with his dismissive attitude and arrogance, now found himself isolated. The once ambitious officer who had flaunted his power was now a pariah, his colleagues avoiding him like the plague. Word of his suspension had spread quickly, and whispers circulated throughout the department about his history of misconduct. Marcus Williams made it clear that this was only the beginning of the changes he intended to implement. As the days passed, Marcus made it a point to walk the halls regularly, his presence serving as a constant reminder to his officers about the standards he expected. He greeted everyone he passed, taking the time to listen to concerns. No matter how small, it was clear that his leadership style wasn't about asserting power, but about fostering an environment where respect and professionalism were the cornerstone of every interaction. For many officers, it was the first time they had felt truly seen and heard in years. But not everyone was receptive to change. While some officers, like Officer Reyes, stepped forward to acknowledge their complicity in the toxic culture and expressed a willingness to do better, others clung to the old ways. The ones who had once walked with arrogance now walked with their heads down. Their discomfort palpable, Marcus understood that change wouldn't happen overnight. It would take time, and many of his officers would need to be nudged or even pushed out in order to make room for those who were truly committed to creating a more inclusive and just department. One afternoon, as Marcus sat at his desk reviewing the internal investigations into Daniels's past conduct, he received an unexpected call from Captain Harris. "Chief." The captain's voice was tentative. "I just wanted to say you handled things better than most would have." Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. "Thanks, Captain. But the real work starts now. I need Daniels's full history on my desk by tomorrow, including complaints and incident reports." Captain Harris hesitated. "And Chief, I think you shook a few of them today. Good work." Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before diving back into the mountain of paperwork. He knew the fight was far from over. But every small victory, every officer who spoke up, every recruit who showed a willingness to change, was a step forward in the long road to restoring trust and accountability to the department. And Marcus wasn't about to let up until that work was done. As the weeks passed, the atmosphere at the precinct became more tense. Officers who had once viewed themselves as untouchable began to feel the weight of Marcus Williams's presence. The department's culture of arrogance and entitlement was being chipped away. Piece by piece, officers who had once mocked the idea of accountability now found themselves facing it head-on. Marcus made it clear that this was just the beginning, and those who weren't willing to adapt would find themselves on the outside looking in. One morning, as Marcus entered the precinct for his daily rounds, he found Officer Daniels sitting alone in the break room, his eyes downcast. The smugness that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a deep sense of defeat. As Marcus walked past him, their eyes met for a moment, and the message was clear. Daniels was no longer in control. His actions had not only led to his suspension, but had also exposed a deeper flaw within the department's culture. Marcus's leadership had shattered the illusion that officers like Daniels could act with impunity. The change wasn't just about bringing justice to those who had been wronged, but about showing the entire department that it was possible to create a place where respect, professionalism, and accountability were the norm. Over the next few months, Marcus worked tirelessly to implement training programs, conduct internal reviews, and foster open dialogues with the community. He knew that true change would require constant vigilance and hard work. But he also understood that the seeds of a better department had been planted. For the first time in a long while, officers like Officer Reyes began to feel like they had a voice in the department. She approached Marcus one afternoon, confessing that she had once been complicit in the toxic culture. Out of fear of retaliation, "I want to do better, Chief," she said earnestly. Marcus smiled, his tone firm but encouraging. "That's all I ask. It starts with you." But not everyone was willing to change. Daniels's appeal against his suspension was swiftly denied, and he was eventually dismissed from the force. His past transgressions, including excessive force and inappropriate comments, were exposed during the review. Marcus's stance on accountability had sent a clear message. The days of ignoring misconduct were over. Despite the progress, Marcus knew the road ahead would not be without challenges. There would always be those resistant to change. But the department was moving in the right direction. The true measure of his success wouldn't come from the absence of resistance, but from the way his officers, those willing to listen and grow, would embody the values he had worked so hard to instill. He was determined to stay the course, knowing that each small victory was a step toward a more just and equitable system for everyone. As Marcus Williams settled into his role, He began to see the fruits of his labor manifest in subtle yet significant ways. One of the most powerful moments came when he attended a community event one Saturday afternoon. The air was warm, the streets filled with families out enjoying the sunshine. As Marcus made his way through the crowd, he noticed a young boy standing off to the side, his eyes wide with wonder. The boy hesitated for a moment, then approached Marcus shyly, looking up at him with curiosity. "Are you really the chief?" the boy asked, his voice almost a whisper. Marcus crouched down to meet the boy's gaze, offering him a warm smile. "I am," he said gently, his voice calm and reassuring. The boy's eyes brightened, but his next words were heavy with the weight of years of community mistrust. "My dad says the police don't care about us." Marcus paused for a moment, letting the boy's words sink in. He could see the skepticism in the boy's eyes, a skepticism that many others in the community shared. But instead of brushing it off, Marcus took a deep breath and replied, "I can't change the past, but I promise you we're working to do better. And if you ever need help, you can come find me. Okay?" The boy nodded, a small smile breaking across his face. Marcus stood up, watching as the boy ran off to join his friends, his laughter filling the air. It was moments like this that reminded Marcus why he had taken the job in the first place, to make a real difference. To rebuild trust between the police and the community they served. By the end of his first year as chief of police, Marcus could see the changes in the department. Though he knew the journey was far from over, officers who had once been resistant to his leadership were now starting to embrace it. New recruits, inspired by his vision for a fair and respectful department, were replacing the old guard that had once been entrenched in the toxic culture. The precinct, once a place of division, was beginning to feel like a true community. Still, there were hurdles to overcome. The changes Marcus had implemented weren't universally accepted, and the road ahead would not always be smooth. But Marcus was undeterred. He knew that lasting change didn't happen overnight, it took time, perseverance, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Every small victory, whether it was an officer speaking up for the first time or a member of the community expressing newfound hope, was a step forward. In the months that followed, Marcus's reputation grew, not just as a leader, but as someone who had the courage to take on the difficult work of changing a broken system. He continued to lead with integrity, staying true to his principles, and inspiring others to do the same. The community, once skeptical, began to see the true potential of their police department. They started to believe in the possibility of a future where the badge wasn't a symbol of power over them, but a symbol of service and justice for all. As Marcus stood in the precinct one evening, watching the officers file out after their shifts, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The precinct was far from perfect, but it was undeniably different. The camaraderie among the officers was no longer tainted by fear or intimidation. Instead, it was rooted in respect and mutual trust. Marcus knew that there would always be challenges ahead, but for the first time, he felt hopeful. Change was never easy, but as he watched his officers leave for the day with a renewed sense of purpose, he knew that the fight for a better, more just police department had only just begun, and he was ready to lead the way.